When's the last time you had a pep talk? Pep talk, pep talk.
Yo, when's the last time you had a pep talk? Has it been a minute? That's okay, you're in the right place. I've got you. Welcome to Pep Talk. And today, I'm going to help you get over discouragement and learn to be persistent. Now let's get it. Welcome to Pep Talk, the podcast that cheers you on and coaches you up. We believe that you're great, but we also believe that there is another level for you to aspire to. I am your host, Coach Jay, and it is my honor and my privilege to be able to come here and chat with you, encourage you to start your week or whenever you listen to it during the course of the week. I'm just glad to be here with you to reinforce that you were great, but there's still another level. There's another depth. And so that's what this podcast is all about. It's about providing the encouragement, the motivation, the inspiration that will allow you to tap into yourself, to do the work, to become as great as you desire to be in this life. So like I said in the opener, today we are talking about discouragement, something with which we are all well acquainted. Am I right? If you have never experienced discouragement in your life, I can't think of anybody who has never experienced it. But if you haven't, I don't know if I should say good for you, or I don't know if I should say keep living. It's bound to come. Not wishing, anything on anybody. But I think, if you've never experienced discouragement, then you are bound to experience at some point in your life. And when I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking about a moment in my life where, because I've had several moments where I've been discouraged, but I can remember when I was trying to, so I'd worked in human resources for 7 years. Then I'd gone back to school to become a teacher. And so I think I've talked about this on the podcast where I worked at Walgreens to bring something into the household. And I went to school to become a teacher. And when it came down to do my student teaching, I refused to do student teaching in a traditional sense because I didn't want to do it for free. And so I would only do student teaching if I could get a job in a school district and get paid while I was doing my student teaching. And so I had been subbing at a school, at a high school, and I loved it. I had a great experience with the rapport with the principal. I had a great rapport with the students. They loved me. They loved me there. The staff, they all loved me there. And so I just knew that when I got to this point where I was able to be hired for a job, I just knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this school would hire me. And so I put my application in and I talked to the principal about it, and they didn't even want to interview me. Despite how great a job I had done in my subbing, despite how in demand I was as a substitute teacher at that school, I couldn't even get an interview there. That was a shot to my pride. And I kept applying at schools. Even though I didn't have any prior teaching experience, I kept applying to various different schools, and I kept getting rejected. One after the next, after the other, after the other, after the other. And then I had an interview at a school. And during the interview, the principal really didn't show much interest. She even checked her phone during the interview and called me by the wrong name during the interview. Not throwing shade, but that's how the interview went. And I remember being so discouraged, really, God, I know that you told me to leave human resources and to go into education. I believe that. Why is this happening? Why do I keep getting told no? Why is no school willing to give me a shot? The discouragement was real, y'all. It was very, very real. And I remember I'm sitting there, feeling sorry for myself, wondering if I had heard God right, if this were the right thing for me to do. And then I sat down and I just, I decided to go ahead and write my thank you letter because I'd been in the process of writing a thank you letter to every principal that interviewed me, regardless of the outcome. And so I sat down and I wrote this thank you letter to this principal. And guess what? I got the job. And after I'd been hired, the principal came to my classroom and said, I wasn't going to hire you based on the interview because the interview was not great. But what convinced me was your thank you letter. And I go back to that and I think about it often because writing that thank you letter, it was persistence on my part. For me, it was not just a thank you for interviewing me, but it was almost like a last ditch effort for me to try to convince a principal that despite the interview, and I always thought that I was a great interviewee, because I'd worked in human resources, so I know how to interview. But the thank you letter was my last gasp effort to convince the principal to really give me a fair shake. And in this sense, it worked. And I got the job and I worked at that school for 6 years. And it was one of the greatest 6 years of my teaching life. But that discouragement, it almost stopped me from doing the thank you letter. And had I not done the thank you letter, I would not have had the job. And today we're talking about discouragement because there are a lot of people out there. This job market right now, it is hard. It is hard. People, despite there being jobs out there, I think this job market is probably more brutal than any job market that I can remember. And it really kind of blows my mind because I can look on Google and I can look on LinkedIn and I can look at all these different places and see thousands of jobs available. But there are hundreds of thousands of people out there who are looking for the same thousands of jobs, and there's just not enough space to go on. So I know that there are people out there who are dealing with discouragement. At the same time, people are looking for jobs. People are being laid off of jobs, and people are being fired from jobs. And so there is a huge amount of discouragement because goods and services like grocery store visits. I saw a picture on Facebook or on Instagram, one of those, where this person went to the store and purchased the same amount of things that they had purchased 4 or 5 years ago, and they were paying, 2 years ago, and they were paying almost 3 times as much now. So money is not going as far. Cost of living is not keeping up with the cost of living, right? So there's a lot of discouragement going along. There is so much discouragement going around. And so I thought that an episode like this, where we talk about discouragement and how to combat it with this spirit of persistence, I think it can help. I really think that it can. And so that's what we're talking about here. And so if you're someone who can identify with what it feels like to be discouraged, then I hope that this episode can really provide some hope, can provide you with some encouragement to keep things going, because there is always hope. There is hope. It was Winston Churchill who said that success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And when we're talking about discourage, that is quite literally a lack of courage to continue. But persistence is such an important tool to have in your toolbox because it's a key trait in what successful people have, because it helps to overcome temporary setbacks. And where discouragement comes in, it latches itself to a temporary setback, and it can convince us that a temporary setback, a seasonal setback, is a permanent state of being, and that's not often the case at all. So what is discouragement? Here's a definition. It is a loss of confidence or enthusiasm. It is dispiritedness. And here are the common causes: unmet expectations, criticism, comparison with others, and a lack of progress. So I ask you again, How many of you have dealt with discouragement? Raise your hand. I think I would probably see 100% if we were in the same spot. Now, researchers have done they've looked into how discouragement affects the brain. And it affects the brain in a lot of different ways. Serotonin levels. It can lead to your serotonin levels becoming unbalanced. Ongoing discouragement can impair nerve cells in the hippocampus. Serotonin receptors act differently in people who are discouraged than in people who are not sad. It can result in negative thought patterns. So it can cause people's brains to get into this closed loop cycle of negative thoughts. The brain recognizes these thoughts as significant, and it makes it easier to think them by increasing blood supply and white matter to speed up this negative processing loop. And this leads to a cycle of depression and a mode of thinking that becomes that much harder to break. And so now, what does discouragement feel like? What is the emotional attachment or the emotional manifestation of discouragement? It is feeling heavy or stuck, sad. And when you feel discouraged, it literally colors so much of your world. You easily find more discouraging signs that things won't work out. Think about it. Like I said in the very last episode 72, we talked about the power of presence, like the power of being present in the now. And we talked about how your brain is designed as a pattern recognizer. So when you tell your brain to only think about discouraging things that discourage you, guess what? Your brain is going to become adept at looking at everything in your life that has ever discouraged you, and it's going to become hyper-focused on that very thing, right? So it's important that we don't allow that to happen. Your brain can have a negativity bias, which makes it sensitive to anything negative when you're feeling down. So when you're experiencing discouragement, every single moment in your life where you have felt discouraged, those feelings begin to pile on. Those stories begin to pile on. Every person who has ever discouraged you, you begin to remember. You see them in your brain. You think about every moment in your past when you didn't feel chosen, when you didn't feel like you were worth it. And the discouragement begins to add up, and it adds up, and it adds up, and it becomes this overwhelming storm that begins to beat on you, and it beats on you over and over and over again, and you don't know how to find your way out. And looking for just any modicum of something to hold on to, you feel like you are a tiny ship that is in the midst of an overwhelming sea, and a storm is coming against you, and you don't know how to come against it. And that's what discouragement feels like. Because you can't find your way to your tenacity. You can't find your way to your optimism. It just becomes an overwhelming feeling that you don't know how to get your way out of. And I don't want you to succumb to the storm of discouragement, because I know for a fact how overwhelming and how unconscionable it is. It becomes like a dark wave. And that darkness feels like it's coming to take you out. I've had so many points in my life where I've just felt so overwhelmingly discouraged and not up to it, and that I'll never be anything. The negative talk, I'll never amount to anything. This dream will never come true. This next year of life will never be this. I'll never do this, and never becomes a part of the vernacular. And when never becomes a part of the vernacular, you need to pay attention. Because never is a powerful word. And I am a huge believer in the power of words, right? Because the Bible describes the tongue as a little thing that sets things on fire. that leads to that's the saying that your words have power. And it's not just the words that you say to other people, but it's especially the words that you say to yourself about yourself, how you speak to yourself and about your dreams and about your situations. The things that you say, they have the power to come true. So if we're going to be saying anything about ourselves, it's important that we're speaking words of life, not speaking words of death. And when we're caught up in the throes of discouragement, it's hard. Y'all, it's hard. But that is why it is so important that we build the muscle of persistence, of continuing to keep going, continuing to keep rowing when things are hard, continuing to speak positivity over our lives when the only thing that we look and we see are the negatives, continuing to speak life, continuing to speak hope, continuing to believe better, even when discouragement is trying to hit. Think about some of your favorite authors or artists or sports figures. At some point, they were told no. They were told they weren't good enough. I know she's not popular right now or anymore, maybe, but JK Rowling, the number of times she was rejected before Harry Potter hit. She had to have an overwhelming amount of belief in herself, an overwhelming amount of belief in what she had to offer. Y'all, the no's are going to come. We have to learn to fight. And y'all, don't cancel me for mentioning JK, but it's a relevant example. People are going to tell you no. Situations are not always going to be right for what you have to offer, for who you are. But when you build up persistence and when you build up a wall of positive emotion in the midst of a discouraging time, then you're able to continue rowing against the tide of negativity. So, how do we deal with discouragement when it comes up against us? Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you is you're going to have to learn how to reframe those negative thoughts. Remember, I told you, if we focus too much on the negative, then our mind creates a negative automatic feedback loop. But we can't allow that to happen. So we have to learn to reframe negative thoughts. Instead of, I'll never get the job, the positive reframe is, the right job for me is out there. Instead of saying, I'll be alone for the rest of my life, tell yourself that the right person is out there. Instead of, I'll never accomplish my dream, tell yourself that there is a way. I've just got to keep plugging at it. I've got to keep pacing myself. I've got to keep working. You know what? Stop. That's not the first step. The first step is not the positive reframe. The first step is actually acceptance. And by acceptance, I mean that when you feel discouragement, you have to allow yourself to feel it, even if it sucks. You can't get to the positive reframe until you deal with the feelings. You have to acknowledge the feelings. You have to write them down. You have to say it to yourself. Research shows that when we acknowledge our difficult feelings, we get through them faster and we experience them with less intensity. And along with that, another part of practicing acceptance is to see how things are clearly as they are, without applying any color to them or blowing them out of proportion. Like if you're trying to lose weight and you're discouraged, acceptance looks something like, I'm not where I want to be yet. I've had a tough time sticking with the regular exercise. I've had a tough time getting my diet in practice. Instead of saying, I'm never going to be able to lose weight. I should have already lost this amount of weight. This always happens. I'm awful at it. I suck at losing the weight. This is how I'm going to be forever. No. Okay? See the situation clearly as it is. Acceptance is the opposite of giving up. Acceptance says that there is a way forward, but I'm going to pause to understand that right now doesn't feel good, and that's okay. I'm not stopping here. Acceptance is an active decision to meet life where it is and on your terms, and then to decide the next step from there. Right? And so then we move from the acceptance to the gratitude. So we're accepting where we are. And we're being honest, and we're acknowledging that the last thing that we want to be doing when we feel down is counting our blessings. That's just a fact. But again, science shows that moving from acceptance to gratitude is the best way to help yourself feel better. I talk about gratitude a lot because it's powerful. When you practice gratitude, your brain releases serotonin and dopamine, which helps you to feel good in the short term, but it also helps you become more productive, less anxious, and you can develop a mindset of possibility versus scarcity. So in the midst of your discouragement, you accept how you feel, but you find things to be grateful for. And so a popular practice is to, in the midst of your discouragement, write down 3 things you were grateful for that are as closely related to the thing that is discouraging you as possible. Again, not asking you to ignore anything difficult or negative, but I'm asking you to zoom in the midst of the discouragement to find the things that you appreciate within that difficulty. So for example, if the job opportunity didn't work out, be grateful for the interview. Be grateful that you had the courage to apply for the position. Be grateful for the family and friends who supported you as you applied for the job. Pausing to appreciate something that is tough gives you the resilience you need to get through it. Okay? All right, so we've accepted it, right? We are finding the gratitude within it. The next step is going to be intentional kindness. And this part is simple. The best way to make yourself feel better when you're discouraged, and the best way to get out of your own head, is to do something kind for someone else. That means paying the blessing forward or blasting your stress with kindness, however you want to say it, okay? Pause and think about 3 kind things that you can do right then, and then do them. Check in on a friend. Hold the door open for somebody else. Buy somebody coffee. Send an article to somebody who might be interested in reading it. Send a podcast like this one, hint, hint, to somebody who might need the encouragement. Leave a kind note for a colleague or for a family member. And think about this. You feel 100% of the emotions that you give to others. So when you share kindness in the midst of your discouragement, you feel that kindness inside. Then the next step is to focus on the bigger why. You have to find a way to connect to your why, to your sense of meaning. And this is called the bridge of resilience. Thinking about the bigger why in the midst of your discouragement gives you an impetus. It provides the energy for continuing to move forward. If you're a writer and you're discouraged because you're getting a lot of rejections, think about the bigger why. Okay? If you're a podcaster and your audience is not where you want it to be and you're feeling discouraged, what's your bigger why? Perhaps you see that maybe even in the midst of your 15 listeners or your 10 listeners, those 10 are getting the encouragement that they need to keep going. Latch on to that, right? Because we derive a bigger sense of meaning when we use our strengths to be of service to others. So what is your bigger why? Remember, we are not allowing discouragement to settle in, but we're finding a way to navigate it in a mindful way. And then step 5 is self-care. It's looking yourself in the mirror and saying, yeah, this sucks, but just keep going. It is looking at yourself and saying, man, this feels horrible, but I'm not going to always be here. This is just a season. And while this season may feel like it's lasted for 10 years, for 20 years, you've got to give yourself a pep talk. Because a pep talk that you give to yourself can be just as effective, if not more effective, as one that you hear from somebody else. So find yourself a mirror and tell yourself how amazing you are. Tell yourself that you're strong. Tell yourself that even though things don't work out according to your timeline, they will work out. Tell yourself that you're proud of yourself, that you know that you're working, that you're doing your best, that you're giving this all that you've got, and that eventually something's going to hit. You're not always going to stay here in this space where you're being rejected, where you're not feeling worth it. At some point, it's going to hit. These are the ways that we successfully navigate discouragement. Which one stands out most to you? Which one of these steps do you find that is easier for you to do? Which one of these are harder for you? Send me a fan mail. Let me know which one is the hardest, which one is the easiest. When we talk about navigating discouragement and building persistent, which one comes more natural to you? And which one is more foreign to you? I want to hear from you. Okay, so I need you to listen up. And I need you to take whatever note you need to take right now in the last segment, whatever. I need you to be locked in right now, because I'm speaking to you and I'm speaking to me when I say this next part. Y'all, this discouragement is just a moment, but it's your moment. It's a moment where the rubber of your life meets the road. Discouragement is just a temporary visitor. It's not permanent. And don't let it become that visitor that sleeps on your couch for a night and then stays for the rest of your life. It's not your identity. It is certainly not your destiny. There is greatness that is burning inside of you. And I'm here to tell you that you are unstoppable. When the world says you can't, you need to shout back, watch me. When that discouragement says you can't, you look it in the face and you shout back, watch me, because you have the power, the drive, the determination, and the passion to turn your setbacks into comebacks. I want you to think about why you started this journey that you're on. Why did you start it? I need you to feel that initial purpose in your heart. I need you to visualize your goals. I need you to see yourself achieving and thriving and conquering every obstacle. That vision and that dream, it is yours for the taking. And so when discouragement tries to knock you down, I need you to rise up stronger. When doubt creeps in, I need you to shut it down and with relentless positivity, but also with the acceptance that it's happened. Work through the steps. You've got what it takes. You have the skills, you have the strength, you have the determination to make it happen. Y'all, no more excuses. Seriously. Every step is progress. Every step is you saying, I will not be defeated. I'm not going to be denied. You are a winner. You are an unstoppable force of nature. So get out of your own way. Burst through the discouragement and show yourself and the rest of the world what you're made of. As much as I believe in you, you have to believe in yourself. Level up, elevate, slay the day. Get out there, seize the day, and show the world what you're made of. The impact that you are meant to have in this life is dependent upon you to forge a way forward through your discouragement toward your destiny. And as much as I can encourage you, you have to encourage yourself. So find a mirror and find the words and the belief to keep going despite how you feel and what might be staring at you from a discouragement angle. You've got this. You have to have it because nobody's coming to save you. You're going to have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just find the impetus to keep going. I know you can. You have to know that you can too. And that is how we're going to end episode 73 of Pep Talk. We have been talking about discouragement, what it is, and how to fight it. And I think I've given you some of my best insights as someone who's dealt with encouragement a lot, as someone who feels things very deeply and very personally. There is a way forward, and this too shall pass. Okay? Okay. Don't let this temporary thing become a permanent house guest in your heart. There is so much more for you to do in your life. There is so much more for you to accomplish. There are lives for you to impact and influence. And if you're going to get through it, you're going to have to get through the discouragement. All right. So that has been episode 73 of Pep Talk. If you have derived value from any of this, I would love to hear from you. Send me a fan mail. Send an email to thepeppodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Instagram at _JBSpeaks. I want to hear from you. I want to know what is sticking with you, what is standing out about this topic of getting through discouragement and finding your persistence. Because it's the only way that we're going to get through it. Y'all, leave us a 5-star rating and a review. Hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your friends and your family who need this type of pep talk to help them get through the week or the month or just this season. Okay? Coach J, I'm here with you. I've got you. We're going to get through this together. And I will see you next week for another episode of Pep Talk. Y'all know how we end it, right? Keep it love, keep it light, keep it peppy. We'll see you next week for episode 74 of Pep Talk. It's your boy, Coach J. Y'all be blessed. Peace.